What's up, future shred lords? Welcome back. Death to the Fingers. The DTTF vacation continues 2025. So someone on the net was like, hey, Handy, since you're not making the guitar vids, why don't you talk about how metal YouTube is dying? I had to look into it, actually, because I didn't know. But yeah, I guess that's a thing. I think it's just indicative of actually more of a societal thing. We're just burning people out. You know, YouTube is, it's a hamster wheel for people. And YouTube is kind of evil as a corporation. You know, they hold out that carrot there. They turn on the faucet. They let you get some subs and some views and stuff like that. You start growing. You start going crazy, trying to produce content and stuff, be the next Mr. Beast or whatever it is. And, you know how it is. It burns you out. So I had to learn to take vacations and just change up your content and whatnot. Now that we got the new computer, we can make more videos about recording, which is going to come soon. But that's the way it works. You can't just stay stagnant. That was another one, is just the content got so narrowed down by like these ridiculous sort of YouTube content rules, even whether they're written or unwritten, with the jump cuts and this other stupid stuff and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I don't know. I don't follow the rules. I don't care what YouTube does. I know never going to promote my videos or whatever else it is. It just kind of goes out. It does its thing, whatever. It is what it is. I don't care. I love all of you guys. I really, really do. But as far as the YouTube thing, no. I'm 50. What? No, that's just a fool's errand. You know what I mean? I like making the videos. Of course, I love making the videos and making the music and stuff like that and putting it out and building a community and stuff of people that are like-minded, want to hear cool music and want to learn how to make this kind of music for themselves or just music in general. But I didn't want to infantilize people by being like, oh, here's the scale chart and all the rest of that stuff. I wanted to start talking to people like adults and be like, if you want to be a musician, you kind of got to come to terms that we talk like this and we use this type of terminology to express ourselves, So if you're going to get into music, you need to sort of, jump in with both feet and just slowly acclimatize yourself to these concepts like the diatonic scale and all the rest of that stuff. I think that's totally normal. But other people wanted to cast the net so wide that, again, they get caught into this situation where it's very formulaic, and of course it becomes a grind with respect to just producing the videos. You have to constantly come up with new stuff. And I think the big one too, which killed it, was the commercialization of the websites themselves. Like a lot of the websites or whatever, the channels that used to look at how old I am, the websites. Oh, damn. Oh, shit. That's back in the old days, man, when there was no YouTube per se. It was just a bunch of websites where you would surf around to see a whole bunch of different information about playing music. Man, that's like late 90s, like start early 2000s. Oh, wow. The shred community. And we were just starting to come out with videos and stuff like that, like tiny little pixelated garbage ones. And then YouTube broke on the scene and I was just like, ooh, look at this. And that was it. But these channels basically commercialized themselves and it stopped being about making music videos or just talking about music and blah, 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 or their favorite artists and all the rest of that stuff, and became about monetizing the channel and basically trying to extract funds from their viewers. I guess, you know what I mean? Like they just turned their back on the original content and made it more about either selling a product like one of these pedals or an amplifier or something like that. And listen, I'm not criticizing at all. do you. But I think that turned a lot of people off because they're like, listen, if you want to, schlep some products and stuff, like, sure. But to make the channel's sole focus that now doesn't make sense to me. Like, listen, you got to diversify your content. Rick Beato's got it down pat. I think that he's got a really good sort of flow with respect to his content. He does music videos, not as much as he used to, but of course he's done hundreds of them. He does sort of analysis stuff, which is smart. He talks about current music trends and reveals truths about the music industry and stuff like that people may not know. So there's a lot of really useful information in there. As far as the music channel, I would probably aspire to be something like that, but more focused on the music stuff and recording. But that's just going to be my sort of focus and whatnot. But there's definitely going to be videos like this in the future where we just talk about normal stuff, because you can't play music all the time. There are aspects about music that have nothing to do with the the physical playing of the actual instrument. It's about developing your mind, acquiring knowledge so that it can grow into a form of wisdom that you can apply in a real world application that lets you navigate the instrument that much better. That's an essential step in anybody's growth as far as the musicianship is concerned. And it's a basic understanding too. You have to go through it. Yeah. It's like, everybody's kind of got to lose their tooth, whatever, when their adult tooth come in. So it's the same sort of principle. It's not something that you can avoid. You have to basically accept your fate and then just embrace it and get it done. And then once you do, it's over with, right? The teeth come in, you brush them twice a day and you're good to go for the most part, right? So that's really important. And so, metal in and of itself, YouTube, music, we've started to narrow things down to the point where it's just not that interesting, because the interesting bands get overshadowed by the more commercially viable ones that the record executives think are going to be whatever, lighting up the charts and getting people listening to it. But look at these people. They've been running the industry for 20 years. You've run it into the ground. Should you really be in charge? I always often think about that Frank Zappa interview where he's like, it was just some dude sitting back there being like, this is some weird shit. Put it out there. We'll see what happens. You know what I mean? And then you get Frank Zappa and countless other bands like that too, that go on to be legendary, not just because they're weird and quirky, but because they actually did something artistically speaking that was worth remembering. It was at the vanguard of something that built up like this huge empire, if you will. Think of like the inflection point of a band like the Talking Heads and all the music that basically spawned, that was directly and indirectly sort of inspired by this representation of the art. The same could be said about the Velvet Underground and these other sort of like pioneering bands, Nine Inch Nails, right? The sort of the Cannibal Corpse, right? Like one of ostensibly the earliest of the death metal bands that just spawned like this behemoth. Without that early 89 stuff where it started to get into the, crossing the border to shock value, you don't get, all the later stuff. And that was basically definitely not rating up too high on the list for the executives at the, at the record company, until they're like, hey man, these guys are selling millions and millions of albums because it's controversial. And it's fundamentally different. Look at that Jim Carrey skit where he's talking about it. Of course, in his movie Ace Ventura, where they do Hammer Smashed Face, but also just in in the sense that he was talking about it. He's just like, I don't understand this band. They're just so interesting to me because they're just so weird. And that's just it. You see what I mean? Once you start taking the most cliched aspects of metal, and this is true for about a whole bunch of things, once you start taking the most cliched elements of some social thing, right? Music or whatever it is, and you start to standardize it to sort of create a product to just spit it out endlessly. And I listened to 3 songs in the past 2 days, and they all sounded very similar in production, very similar with respect to their approach, and very similar with respect to their look. And I was just like, it's okay. It's pretty good, but you see what I mean? That's basically the YouTube effect. That's some sort of external effect that's applied to all creative endeavors now. Remember when YouTube used to be the Wild Wild West? And then they just clipped the wings. And then they did it again with metal. That used to be the final frontier when it came to music. I mean, it's still out there. Don't get me wrong. It's still out there. But you have to hunt. You have to really hunt for it, and you have to know what you're doing, because it's not like you can just find this stuff on the internet, especially when you're talking about being basically shadow banned by search engines and stuff like that, because whatever, they have content on there that they deem as being subversive. That was another big one that I noticed with the metal thing. And listen, I'm not endorsing any political ideologies here, but there's a lot of bands that have some pretty racy lyrics with respect to national socialism and whatnot, which seems to be making quite the resurgence right now. I don't know if you've been on Twitter, but wow, holy smokes, watch out. But here's the thing. I mean, I kind of associate that mentality with, like, you know, Satanism, with black metal. Like, do I listen to black metal because I'm like, you know, paint my room black and you know, pray before an inverted cross and burn the black candles? No. It's just this evolution of extreme music that just takes it to the utter edge. It's the atmosphere that it creates. 99% of the time, I don't know what this person's saying because I really don't care. Just scream into the microphone because it's gratifying to, and sort of whatever soothes away my unhappy feelings, and just gives me a sense of comfort, if you will, because I grew up listening to heavy metal my whole life. And so it's just a natural evolution for me to listen to something like that, which I get a lot of people don't understand. But I'll listen to hair metal. I'll listen to classic rock. I listen to everything, right? Yesterday was Aerosmith. So, you know what I mean? Greatest hits. I was like, you know, I prefer the older stuff, but some of the newer stuff's not too bad. Especially around Permanent Vacation or whatever it is, you know, it's pretty rocking. Even though at the time I'd be like, no, because those were the thrash days. I was more of an Annihilator guy than Aerosmith. But now that I'm older, I can appreciate all kinds of stuff. You know what I mean? And that's just it. You have to sort of know how to satisfy these needs. But yeah, it's just when they started to shadow ban all of these record companies because, you know, they were carrying bands that carried, you know, some questionable lyric content or whatever you want to call that. I just thought this is the beginning of the end. You know what I mean? And it just goes to show you that they just keep tightening the noose of conformity, which just drives people out. It doesn't matter if it's through burnout or creator fatigue, which seems to be probably the most prevalent reason why these people are quitting their YouTube channels and all the rest of that stuff. Or it's, you know, because they just don't want to play the game anymore. They're not seeing, it's as fun and exciting when the subs are going up and the views are going up and there's engagement and stuff like that. But there comes a point around 1 million subs or whatever it is where they just turn the taps off and you start to go into a deficit, and that actually affects people negatively mentally, of course. They're like, we invested all this work into it. Now I'm losing subs for reasons I don't understand and I can't get any answers. It just becomes this exercise in futility. So eventually they burn out that way. They're just like, it's not worth it. Honestly, with respect to the YouTube thing, I feel like you just have to go into it, be like, it's just going to be a body of knowledge with respect to what I think. You can take it or leave it. I don't ask you to actually agree with any of my points. And I welcome any debate. And if it's respectful, then we'll agree to disagree. And if I learned something, thank you. I don't think I'm the smartest person in the world. I just like to apply myself with respect to the pursuit of knowledge. That's why I don't take YouTube overly seriously. I'm shocked and amazed that we have 628 subscribers. It's amazing, right? So I appreciate every single one of you. I really, really do. But the fact of the matter is that, I was super concerned about the information about how to develop the skills to shred in the 80s style, and sort of like sprucing up in a metal way the minor pentatonic and the blues scale and all the rest of the stuff. I just felt like there were too many channels focusing in on fusion shred and all the rest of the stuff, and not enough that were just sort of concentrating on this more mid-range area where it was just like the pentatonic scale, the modes, and the arpeggio sequences, chords, were presented in sort of like a sort of grid format where you had to know music principles, how to build a triad, how to build a dominant 7 chord, how the diatonic scale system works, how caged works. But if you understood how to decode that information, you could lay it onto the fretboard with respect to like a scale, G major, C major, something like that, and have like a predictable set of results, which obviously really significantly improves the learning process and helps you retain this information. So, but that's just it. YouTube hates that. They don't want you learning anything on here. They want you to mindlessly consume content, just like McDonald's doesn't care if their food is healthy. They just want to make their food taste or have some sort of reaction with respect to you eating it so that you'll come back and eat it again. I'm struggling to understand or even come to terms with the idea that fast food companies put additives in their food that make you crave their food again. That's kind of disturbing. Like specifically McDonald's or like, Chick-fil-A or whatever, Popeyes, I don't know. No, I'm just using them as examples, not making any implications there. But yeah, I'm just like, wow, you know what I mean? Like, uh-oh. So yeah, it's it's designed to basically benefit YouTube and put people on the little sort of hamster wheel and get them churning out the content so YouTube stays relevant and can stave off whatever irrelevance by TikTok. But all of them, in and of themselves, act in exactly the same way. They exploit you in ways that you don't actually understand or know. And they offer very little benefit. There is no substitute for spending the time going outside hiking and canoeing and enjoying nature, skydiving, going to the local park and sitting under a tree and reading a book for an hour, going for a swim in the lake, playing sports, hanging out with the boys, in real life, doing something, and then hitting the bar or the pub afterwards for a few cold ones, go out for a ride, whatever it is. There is no substitute for that. I go out every morning at 4:00 in the morning. It's like still night out. It's awesome. It's perfect for exercising because I go for this big, I think it's on, I added on some new blocks. So I think it's about almost 4K now that I'm doing in 50 minutes, which is not too bad. Considering if you were running it, you would be doing it well, like a 7-minute mile. So 4K, that's like a mile and a half, maybe, all told up, maybe a mile and a quarter. So, you know, not so good. Now that I'm doing the math, that analogy didn't work out so well. I was thinking something else. Maybe it was a kilometer in 7 minutes. I don't know. I'm just going to drop that one. Anyways, I'm doing this 4K. It takes me about 50 minutes to do when I'm walking it, but it's awesome, right? It's like you get this exhilaration of just exercise, and also I get a moment to just be at peace with my thoughts. And I go early in the morning because I like to talk to myself. I know that's going to sound crazy, but it is what it is. I like to talk to myself on these walks and just work through my thoughts. This morning, one of the homeless people that was sleeping on a bench, I didn't even see them there because it was dark. I was talking to myself like full bore. And there he was sitting there. So, whoops. Oh, well, you know, I'm like, you're not alone, brother. I'm there with you spiritually, so to speak. But that's just it. The internet doesn't provide that. And of course, being enslaved to the YouTube or any sort of social media grind is going to keep you indoors more than it gets you outdoors. And that's a major level problem. And so you have to, start to prioritize what's more important, living your life or sort of engaging in internet, tomfoolery. That's why I always tell people, as much as I appreciate it, and it would probably hurt me, but don't substitute your life for watching these videos. Instead, take this 20 minutes and go do something of value. Even if it's just go to the local bookstore, the secondhand ones preferably. There's this really cool one over here where you can go and it's just like a rabbit's nest of books piled up all over. There's so many cool little finds, and just sort of, find a cool book and grab it and then read it. That's what I'm talking about. That's life. Go to the secondhand place, the Salvation Army or whatever it is, or Habitat for Humanity or whatever is close to you, the flea market, and just wander around there for an hour and try to find something that you would feel is beneficial to you. Is there a musical instrument there? Some sort of music book that somebody's trying to sell with a CD or whatever it was, you know what I mean? Videotapes. That's living. You can express yourself and engage yourself mentally and pursue knowledge without actually having to sit at the computer. And you'll probably appreciate the moment more. I remember distinctly taking the bus from Orleans and Ottawa downtown to the Rideau Center. No, wait. It was the Saint Laurent Center, where I would go downstairs and there was a music store down there where they would sell the REH videos, and just stand there at the counter and stare at the videos and be like, how much is that one? And he'd be like, it's $89. And I'd look at my wall, there's like $20 in there. And I'd be like, all right, I'll be back when I have $100. And that was just it. And I got the video and I watched it 200 times and then I absorbed that information, right? So I think I'll leave the video there. That was one strange video. I'll give you that. We got one more on Sunday, and then we're back into the playing on Tuesday. Sounds like the finger's kind of coming back to life now. So we'll give her a little bit more time to sort of sort itself out. And then we'll be into the playing. We'll warm ourselves up a little bit, and then beatings for the rest of the year. See you in the next one.